We are live and recording.
Welcome, everybody, to our meeting of the Law School Council. I'd like to ask Teresa if she could take roll to determine if there's a quorum for today's meeting.
Absolutely. Susan Bachian,
Present.
Mary Basic,
Present.
Tiffany Gabrielson, Christopher Ididon,
Present.
Devin Kenyon,
Present.
Mary Beth Moylan, Carly Sassy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now we will move on to our call for public comment. Members of the public can make written public comment submitted to the lsc@calbar.ca.gov email box. We did not receive any written public comment. Verbal public comments of up to 3 minutes will be taken now, first recognizing any individuals who signed up in advance using the link on the agenda. And Teresa will allow them to speak first. Otherwise, we will go by raising hands using the raise hand function on a computer or star or *9 on a phone. Staff will share a timer on the screen during the comments.
Thank you, Chair. There were no advanced signups, and after reviewing the audience list, I do not see any hands raised to provide public comment.
Thank you. We will now move on to the oral report. For this section, I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Law School Council. The Law School Council generally meets twice per year in our committee years between September to August. This year, the Law School Council will meet today, February 5th, and on June 11th. These council meetings are an opportunity for the Committee of Bar Examiners and the State Bar to update ABA schools and to seek feedback in a direct discussion format. In addition, both members of the Law School Council and the public are encouraged to submit topics and questions for these meetings, as well as for the annual State Bar Day for students, Law School Assembly for California Law School administrators, and Registrar's Meeting for California Law School registrars. To submit topics, you can email them to lsc@calbar.ca.gov, which is also posted on each agenda to the chair or to the committee coordinator, Natalie Leonard. I will also say that the State Bar will reach out to members of the Law School Council at times with questions and questions for clarification and input at times. One example is they reached out to ask about the best time to schedule the State Bar Day for students this year. So you have an opportunity to give input as well on those types of matters. And I encourage everyone here to apply to be a member in the future. Applications are open to administrators and ABA-approved law schools in California. The application period opens in the spring, and members are selected by the chair and vice chair of the Committee of Bar Examiners in August to begin 4-year terms that start in September. All meetings are remote. So at this point, I'd like to just ask each member of the Law School Council to briefly introduce themselves and their schools. I guess I'll go quickly. My name is Christopher Ididon. I'm with UC Davis School of Law, and I was appointed to the council in 2020, and I've found it very informative and rewarding. And if I can, I guess, go alphabetical, I'll pass it on to Susan.
I can't remember when I started, so I'm gonna have to have somebody else guess. I think this is the second term I've done, and I was chair at one point, and I also have no idea when that was either. But I will just agree all things that Chris just said about Law School Council. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I've been in law school education long enough to remember when we didn't have as many of these kinds of opportunities to talk directly to State Bar. This is a hands down improvement.
Thank you, Susan. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Basic. I am with UC Irvine School of Law. This is my first term on the council. I've really enjoyed being on it. I was the chair the last year, and I look forward to serving this year as well.
Devin.
Hi, my name is Devin Kenyon. I teach at Santa Clara University School of Law. I don't know how long I've been on this either. I think Susan sort of put it right. I've been here for a while. I was the chair at some point. It's nice to sort of get to actually see people's faces and talk about this stuff, including our colleagues at the State Bar, because there's a lot of action, and it's a great way for us to sort of learn more and ask questions.
And Carly, welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm Carly Sassy. I'm at California Western School of Law. I was just appointed. This is actually my first meeting. So I'm very excited to be here and I look forward to learning a lot from these meetings. So thank you.
And might I take a moment to introduce those that are not joining us today, but will in the future? I'd like to thank Mary Beth Moylan from University of the Pacific, McGeorge, who is a part of the council, as well as Tiffany Gabrielson from UC Law SF. They apologize that they are not here today, but they look forward to attending meetings in the future and being briefed on this meeting today. Thank you.
Excellent. I believe next we have the director's report.
So we'll turn it over to Cody. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I appreciate the round of introductions. And I should start by just saying we really appreciate this opportunity to hear from you and have these discussions as well. There's a few updates that I want to provide in our report here. I think at the top, I want to start with some of the efforts the State Bar has taken on to support applicants and attorneys impacted by the recent wildfires here in Los Angeles. I want to highlight some things first here in the Office of Admissions. We have been promoting through our weekly bar exam countdown emails and elsewhere an email address, which is wildfire.emergencies@calbar.ca.gov. We have asked any February bar exam taker who's been personally affected or displaced by the wildfires to contact us and discuss any necessary changes in their circumstances and how that might impact their future or this upcoming bar exam administration. And I know we've certainly heard from a few impacted individuals and we've worked to respond to their needs. Maybe more concretely, though, is a recent update from earlier this week. The Board of Trustees approved a new refund policy on Monday, February 3rd. And this refund policy will now offer a 100% refund of all bar exam fees, excluding the credit card processing fees. And this 100% refund is available to anyone who's been displaced by not just this natural disaster, the wildfires, but any fire, flood, earthquake, or severe disaster that results in an official state of emergency. The refund policy does have some eligibility criteria. Applicants must demonstrate certain circumstances, such as being displaced for a significant period of time, an uninhabitable primary residence, maybe harm to an immediate family member. There's some more details about this policy. We've recently updated our refund of fees policy webpage. That can be found if you visit our State Bar website, calbar.ca.gov, and visit the February 2025 bar exam webpage. There's a tab there, refund of fees policy, and it will be updated with this brand new update as of Monday the 3rd. I want to turn to some other efforts outside of the Office of Admissions, but other ways that the State Bar is supporting those that are impacted by these wildfires and other similar circumstances. First, the Lawyer Assistance Program, LAP, provides free and confidential support for attorneys, bar applicants, and law students, to be clear. And these services include 2 free counseling sessions with a licensed therapist. They can provide, the emotional and professional support to navigate a really difficult time like this. And so this is a free option that's available, again, to not only attorneys, but applicants and students. You can find on the State Bar website an intake form. Applicants can also contact LAP. There's a telephone number. It's 877-LAP, the number 4, and then the word help, HELP. And there's also an email address, lap@calbar.ca.gov. Now to some other updates, less about providing support, but maybe a call to action for those who want to get involved. The State Bar's webpage regarding pro bono legal services has been updated with information around opportunities to support disaster relief. So if you visit calbar.ca.gov/access-to-justice, there's a pro bono page, and attorneys can sign up to receive notifications about upcoming pro bono opportunities, including those related to disaster relief. We've also linked to some resources where attorneys can find free disaster response training materials and other partner organizations. So some interesting support there. And on that page, we also link to some outside legal help for those who are seeking free or low-cost legal assistance. The webpage for that is lawhelpca.org, and that is a resource provided by the Legal Aid Association of California. And then my final update, not necessarily a natural disaster or a update regarding the fires, but certainly a reprieve for some. And this is the fact that the MCLE deadline has been extended one time until March 29th, 2025. And this is for those attorneys with the last names beginning with the letter A through G. So that deadline had already been extended to March 29th, 2025, but in this moment, and this with everything that's going on and impacting some individuals, having this additional time to complete MCLE credits is probably a welcome opportunity at this point. So I think that's it as far as the director's report. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this really important and timely information and updates.
Next, we have the staff report.
Thank you. So I'll take the first item, which is a report on state bar programs designed to assist with licensure and practice. We've talked about these before, but we like to bring them to your attention and also the public to make sure that these programs are well known, but also to provide feedback. So the State Bar is offering several programs to assist with licensure. One of these, the one that's been going on the longest, is the Bar Strategies and Stories program. This program was developed by a consortium of academics. It has been analyzed as to the results to date twice, and we see very positive results, with particularly positive results for those who are first generation or in underserved groups as well, taking the bar exam. This was offered in conjunction with the February bar exam and will be offered again in July. We were very pleased to be able to fund this program on behalf of applicants through the State Bar, so there is no charge to applicants, and this program takes less than 2 hours to complete. As you are preparing your bar prep programs, we hope that you will include the existence of this program. Applicants can get access when they are signing up, and they can receive the most benefit from signing up for the program if they begin taking that program and complete it right at the start of their study to place themselves in a positive mindset. So that's the first program, and I'll just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or comments regarding that program. Okay, and we know that one the best. The second one that's been going on 2 times is the Bar Retaker Support Group. We offered that through the LAP program in conjunction with the July 2024 bar exam, and also just finished this session for the February 2025 bar exam. Over the summer, we took feedback from both the CS Bars, Committee of State Bar Accredited and Registered Schools, as well as the Law School Council, and we received feedback from the outside, as well as doing studies and surveys with those who are part of the program. The program went very well the first time, and we were able to immediately adopt the feedback from you and also from those other groups to continue to improve the second program. Those that were in that program have received a post-exam survey, but we also welcome your feedback. Most of you have heard secondhand from your applicants taking this. We want to know what you're hearing, but we also have the pleasure of someone on the council who has firsthand experience, Professor Mary Basic, who is one of the professors as part of that Bar Retaker Support Group. So I'll just take a moment to provide Mary with an opportunity to share her experience with the Bar Retaker Support.
Yeah, I think it's a really good program. I've heard a lot of positive feedback kind of from the grapevine of people saying who work at different schools that their students have reported they got a lot out of the strategy. So just so y'all know, what we expanded it to this last time was to include a session on customizing your schedule and score interpretation. Then we had a session on MBE, a session on essay, and a session on performance test. I did the performance test section and the one on score interpretation and scheduling. And for the performance test, I used the last performance test we had, and we walked through it because everyone would be familiar with it. It's hard to teach a performance test in 90 minutes, but I think using one they were familiar with worked really well. I've heard nothing negative about the program, but maybe people wouldn't say it to me, but I think it was helpful. So I'm happy that the bar is reaching out to affirmatively to help people who are retaking the bar exam, because folks do need some customized advice when they're in that situation.
Thank you. And the program is offered as a series of webinars over the lunchtime period to make it very easy for as many people as possible to access. Devin.
Thanks, Natalie. One piece of feedback that will be very funny is a lot of my students were like, "Oh, Mary Basic is a real person," so they loved like that, learning that Mary was actually a real person and not sort of a random author. When we talked about this, I think at the last meeting there was some suggestion particular to the score interpretation session about sort of recording that or figuring out a way to make that sort of a separate, like asynchronous option for people who are interpreting their results. And I don't know if that happened, but I would sort of re-suggest that, because it is something that I spend a huge amount of time on, and it would be wonderful if there was just a video or like a guide that came with the result sheet, so that bar takers themselves could sort of have some sense of what their score sheet means, because the array of things that they think their score sheet means that I have to correct for them, it is kind of surprising sometimes.
Okay, great. I will bring that feedback back to the LAP team and also to our admissions team, part of whom we are here together. Okay, Dean Basic.
Just quickly, in response to that, Devin, my understanding is that the recordings are available. So like if someone didn't attend, that it was available for them, but it is possible that it's only available for those who signed up for each session. And just to let y'all know, I think I want to say like 20% of the retakers ended up signing up for the session. So it was a good amount, but I think that that I had said the same thing, that some of the content could be standalone that people can utilize at their leisure, right? Because people have, different schedule, but agree.
And I'm not sure about the recording availability, so I will look into that, and I'll place what I find as a note in the minutes to this meeting. Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, the next two, so those two were programs that are specifically connected to taking a bar exam that is imminent. The next two programs are programs that one is offered periodically and the other can be offered at any time, including your orientation. So the program that can be offered at any time is our Imposter Syndrome Toolbox Kit. This is an on-demand program that is offered at no charge, that students and applicants can access themselves without advising the school or frankly the state bar, so that they can look at that. Imposter syndrome is something that we have commonly seen with individuals as they begin law school. They're undertaking a legal education to learn something new, but learning something new can bring up those feelings, which bear no relation to the potential success of the student in the future in law school. So working with the Imposter Syndrome Toolbox Kit can help people to understand that they're not alone and to give them specific strategies. This is something that we encourage any student or applicant to use on their own, but we also encourage you to make use of it as at no charge if you feel that it would be helpful for you in your orientations, in your academic support, in your bar exam prep. And you can find a link to that program on our admissions website, but also on the LAP website as well. Are there any questions or comments about the Imposter Syndrome Toolbox? Sure, Mary.
Forgot how to raise my hand. Do you know how long the series is? Like time commitment for a student?
For the imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
I know that it is a single program, and it's not a recording of events. It's a program that they access. I
Okay.
can find out about that and then also place in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I believe it is a more compact program than, say, the retaker support group.
Super.
Okay. And then the final program is one that is offered in a live multi-week format as well. This one is a program not specifically targeted to the bar exam, but for both students / applicants and practicing attorneys who either have ADHD or feel that they may have ADHD-like symptoms or practices or preferences. And this webinar series, we've offered it once so far through the LAP in the fall. One thing to note, we didn't know how much interest we would get. We arranged to have a sort of an extra large capacity Zoom meeting, and within 48 hours, the program was indeed full. So when we offer it in the spring, again, we do expect something similar. So we hope to send out an announcement to students and attorneys in advance saying, hey, the signups are coming. Hey, the signups are here. And so if you think that your students or alumni would be interested in that, there definitely was a lot of interest the first time, and we expect and hope the same when it's offered again this spring. And just finally, to refer to something that Chair mentioned earlier, State Bar Day is a slightly separate program. Not everyone here may have been to that program, but that's something the Executive Director's Office puts on for law students at any point in their progression. It's a chance for them to get to know all of the parts of the State Bar, to understand their rights and responsibilities as a person pursuing licensure in California, and also to make sure that they understand all the resources that we have available, whether now or in the future. We also talk a little bit about careers available at the State Bar for those students and graduates who may want to come join us here. So the date is being worked on now. I expect something a little bit later this spring, and we'll send that out to students, and capacity allowing, I will also invite administrators to join us. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, that's what I have for item number 1. And if we're ready, we'll proceed to item number 2, which is actually also mine. Okay, this is a report on distribution procedures for bar exam pass-fail lists. So we want to make sure everyone is on the same page for how to receive those. So after each exam, the results release for students, actually not students anymore, for those applicants that took the exam, they release on a Friday night at 6 p.m. Results become public on Sunday at 6 a.m. And then by the following Wednesday, we send the results via email to your law school dean. We send as a matter of policy to the dean. It's a consistent position. We always have the updated dean information, and we know that the head of the law school has received that information. And then that pass-fail list can be forwarded to anyone in the school who needs to have it, and also archived for future use. Here we have ABA-approved school administrators participating, so we would encourage you to log that, so as you're creating your ultimate pass lists, that you can have that available for those times. We also sometimes get questions about why was my pass list modified. This is pretty rare, but you might have seen it in your group. The process related to the bar exam is that prior, we send out a list of those that we expect to take the bar exam. And from time to time, there will be individuals on that list that are not allocated to your school, most often because someone was previously enrolled at your school and then has transferred to another school, but has not updated their record yet. So we do encourage and remind the registrar's office to look at those in advance. Once in a while, they miss it at that point, and when the original pass list issues, they say, hey, you know what, this student was here, but now they're on at another school, and then we issue a revised pass list. So, so that is the process that we use. And the reason I bring this up, this is not new. We've been doing this for about 4 exams now. But when we prepared the registrars meeting, the annual all registrars meeting, it was one of the most common questions we got. When will these be sent in electronic format? So when a lot is going on, a good refresher can always be a nice thing. And planning ahead this year, many of you who need additional copies of your pass list for the ultimate pass rate will probably be requesting them right about the time that we are administering the bar exam. So if you need to do that, please do your best to give us a little time and we will respond to you as quickly as we can. Certainly here at the bar, we appreciate and understand the importance of meeting regulatory deadlines. Okay. All right, next topic, report on procedures for updating law school contact information. This might sound boring, but it's very exciting and it's very important, especially right now. We've been sending lots of communications to you in lots of different ways. We've been trying to use redundant means so that everyone listening will have the information no matter which format is best for them. But we can't contact you if we don't have your updated information. So at your school, if you've had a recent change to your dean or your registrar in particular, please make sure you let us know. You can contact me or you can write to admissions@calbar.ca.gov so that we can update our records and be sure we're sending to you. An issue that we've seen recently that we had not seen before is this, particularly with the registrar's office. Many registrars will provide the contact of themselves so we can reach them directly via phone or email. But the official email that they want us to use is an evergreen email, so registrar@mylawschool.com. But what we've seen recently is in transitions, a new registrar comes and does not realize that an evergreen email was in place. So if your school uses an evergreen email, please add that into your desk manual if you want to keep using it that way so that someone will check that email. Another thing that happens more than you would think, at least once every year, is that a school, usually through the IT department, wanting to manage IT privacy, security, spam blockers, various things, blocks the state bar's email. I've seen this happen every year for the last 3 or 4 years. And often the bar support and dean administrators do not know because it's part of the normal IT processes, and the IT department is not saying, I'd like to block the state bar. But sometimes we send you a lot of mail and that flips triggers. So we often find that out because someone will call and say, hey, I've been wondering about this. We realize we've sent lots of communications and then that's how we figure it out. So if you have safe list address procedures at your school, please do make sure that calbar.ca.gov is in that address book so we get those. And also at this time, the Measure Learning related items at Measure Learning is one of those that at measurelearning.com and also testing support at measurelearning.com are also in that address book at your school. I'm going to stop it for a moment there. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about that? Just making sure that you and then also your students put those important addresses into your address book. I know that we've heard from you that students don't think about as much about email as they once did, but it remains an important source of information. So we thank you for that. Okay, so we appreciate your help in helping us to keep you informed as easily as possible and as quickly as possible. Okay, so those are the reports that I have. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Cody to talk about the first year law students exam.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm gonna get my screen ready to share here so I can show you all some interesting figures and visuals, but I want to just provide some background about why we are presenting this information. We have heard from some members here and others that information about the format changes to the first year law students exam is of interest. I want to start by recognizing that, we understand that this audience here of our ABA law schools, their students aren't required to sit for the first year law students exam, although some law schools do require it for certain students, particularly those who are facing perhaps academic disqualification. Regardless, though, we've been bringing a lot of data analysis and a lot of survey findings from applicants themselves to various committees, and this group has yet to hear about these updates and hear the findings from our post-exam surveys related to the most recent first-year law students exam. So I'm excited to bring this update to this group and share what we have found following some interesting changes. So let me start with that. There have been some recent changes to the format of the first-year law students exam. First, there has been a shift towards a new modality in how it is administered. Currently, the first year law students exam is administered primarily at vendor-owned test centers. These are test centers owned by Prometric. And there is a remote option for those with certain extenuating circumstances, perhaps lack of available space, an out-of-state applicant, whatever it might be. This model has proven very successful. We've had a high satisfaction rate, and I'll be getting to that in just a second. The other change recently is the change to the exam design and format. Recently, beginning with the June 2024 exam, the essay portion of the first year law students exam was removed. So the exam today is only 100 multiple choice questions divided into two 90-minute sessions. What's interesting about this change, this was something that came about after extensive research and discussion with the Committee of Bar Examiners. I'd like to point out the kind of main finding from research conducted that drove this decision. Our previous state bar psychometrician, Dr. Roger Bolus, analyzed first-year law exam students, or first year law student exam data from 2020 to 2000 to 2016. Geez, 2000 to 2016, and found that eliminating the essays actually improved the reliability of the exam and actually improved the predictive validity of this exam in predicting future bar exam outcomes among this test-taking population. So that analysis performed by Dr. Bolus was quite compelling. The Committee of Bar Examiners discussed whether or not it should change the format of the exam based on that input, and ultimately decided that in early 2024, with the June 2024 exam being the first to administer this new format. What we have found since then, interestingly, has been that the two most recent administrations, June 2024 and October 2024, had a higher pass rate than the previous year. We had a 13% pass rate in June and October of 2023. That is interesting, but I want to note, I think additional data is needed to really identify long-term trends. As we could see, June had a 32% pass rate, and that dropped significantly the following administration. And we have other data in our law school performance report that's published yearly that shows that first-year law student exam pass rates do vary quite dramatically year over year. Nonetheless, the format changes have led to have preceded some interesting outcome changes, and this is something that I think we're really excited to continue to track. With that, though, we certainly wanted to make sure that the exam format met the needs of our applicants as well. So we introduced a variety of new survey questions in our post-exam surveys meant to better understand the impact of these changes. Overall experience shown on the screen here, not a new question, but a dramatic increase in satisfaction in the overall testing experience from June 2023 compared to June 2024 and October 2024. So we see nearly a 30-point increase between June 2023 and October 2024. So that suggests that the modality change and the format change overall led to a positive test taking experience. We also want to try to get at what the exam format changes meant for preparation and for, frankly, a test taker's perception of their performance. So we also asked in this the most recent 2 surveys whether the exam format change impacted an applicant's perception of their preparedness. And we found that in June 2024, 74% said that they felt more prepared. And in October 2024, 57% said that they felt more prepared. So interesting to understand that removing the essay component perhaps provides a certain improvement in an applicant's kind of confidence in their preparation prior to the exam. We also asked whether or not the exam format change impacted their perceived performance. We did not look at actual performance. We asked an applicant, how well do you think you performed considering this change? And similarly, we found in June 2024 that 62% felt that they performed better than they would have. And 44% in this last October 2024 exam survey said that they felt that they performed better. So, overall, between the overall positive test taking experience and then these positive findings related to a test taker's feelings about their preparedness and performance, I think helped round out what had previously been kind of a psychometric perspective of why the exam change was a good thing. This suggests that it's also something that's positively received and has had a positive impact on test takers themselves. So that is about the first year exam. And as I mentioned at the top, we recognize that the first year exam is not something that many of your students will sit for. But I think I should also note that the introduction of some new questions and some other survey questions that we didn't include here have served as some interesting pilots for ways for us to measure test taker experience in our bar exam surveys as well. So I would anticipate later this year after the February bar exam, we'll also bring to all of our various committees a post-February 2025 bar exam survey that will be informed by some of these interesting new questions. Mary, I see that your hand's raised. Happy to take a question.
Yeah, just a quick question. So
Sure.
when you eliminated the written component on the exam, were the multiple choice questions the same, or did they also alter?
Meaning altered, were they like written in a new style or?
Yeah,
I'm
were
sorry.
they were they also new questions? Like was it I'm
Yeah.
curious about the 13% to the 3226. Like what was the only difference is that you eliminated the written component and otherwise, because well, I'll just say, for example, with the MBE, it's primarily the same test. That's one we're most familiar with. So if they just remove the written part, the rest of it would be the same. Or was there new questions that were multiple choice?
Got it.
I
Go
think
ahead, Audrey.
we refresh the multiple choice. Well, you know how an item bank works, where you do refreshes of the items in the bank. They go through content validation. We would last refresh them, I think, in 2022. So there is, refresh multiple choice questions that are part of the item bank, but the structure, the content, style, not different. You want me to call him Susan? I can.
Oh, I didn't see that. Susan, happy to hear from you as well.
A different kind of question. When we talk about student surveys and about things like the first year exam, the bar exam, what have you, I constantly have a nagging feeling that it's much like all surveys and that the response rates are perhaps low and or not representative. And in particular, what I'm worried about is that low performing or failing students are not represented in having completed these surveys. and that there's a skew. Now, again, I'm not saying there is, I'm just saying my suspicion from other kinds of law school surveys, not yours, is that there's a skew toward higher performing students. That's who answers you. And I'm wondering if you know anything about that, if the psychometricians have looked at that in this data, or if, how is the survey response rate, and do we know who they are?
That is a good question. For these particular first year law student exam surveys, I do not believe we performed a demographic breakdown, but I can, to Natalie's message earlier, I can include in our minutes whether or not there's a presentation to the committee of bar examiners previously that better describe this population. As far as the response rate, I'll give the bar exam survey as an example. Well over 1,000 people completed the last survey. So it is a relatively large sample size. Whether or not it's truly indicative of the test taking population, I think is something that we haven't performed with previous surveys, but we certainly could note that as something we could attempt to do with future surveys.
I would just like to suggest that if at all possible, particularly with the large changes that are coming in February, and certainly there'll be a look toward making July even smoother with the bar exam surveys in particular, if we could try to do something to ensure that we have a representative response, and in particular, folks who had bad experiences or did not successfully complete the exam.
Absolutely. We can explore that. We've actually gained the support of the State Bar's research team in producing our surveys. And so there's, I think renewed capacity to do some more sophisticated analysis as well. So I'll note that as something we can explore.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so regarding, are we ready to move to our next topic? Okay, so we will actually hold the next topic so that we can have Dr. Lisa Chavez from our Office of Research and Statistics join us. And we will skip to the next topic, which is the February 2025 bar exam. We will circle back around to the report with Dr. Chavez when she is available to join us. So in the meantime, thank you and welcome back, Cody, to talk about the February 2025 bar exam.
Well, I want to provide, I think, a lot of information. I want to start with some information that we'll be sharing with applicants and reiterating to applicants in our countdown email. And then I want to provide some new updates to this audience after as well. So let me start with the information that we're continuing to reiterate and share with applicants, because I think it's worthy continuing to spotlight those things. I want to synthesize the resources that we currently have available to our applicants into just a few areas. So one, we recently held a Q&A session. We had about 1,000 participants join. We received many questions from applicants. It was a really robust discussion. Staff took the most common questions received in that Q&A session and responded to them directly in that following Friday's countdown email. We are also continuing to go through those questions, and they're informing updates to the FAQs document, which always serves as a primary resource for applicants. I believe I looked at the FAQs this morning, and the most recent update was February 3rd. So we're continuing to add information and add clarity to the FAQ document wherever possible on a really regular cadence. There's a new resource that the State Bar posted on social media, and we are going to be distributing this week through our countdown email as well. And that is a video explainer of how to use some of the online platforms. I think most importantly, the performance test viewer, showing some of the annotation tools that are available. As I mentioned, this is something that's currently posted. We're going to be distributing it more widely shortly. And I also want to note we've already received some useful feedback about how to continue to enhance those explainers. And so we'll be receiving that information and working to either make adjustments or continue to add to existing resources where we might find that more information is needed. We're also really spotlighting really every week the various technology related tips or information that we feel really greatly reduces the risk of any technological issues. Having both performed the November experimental exam and the mock exam, I think we've really honed in on really just a few tips that can solve really most applicants' issues. And so those include using a personal computer. We've found that we are hearing from applicants that use their own personal computers, that they are facing less snags than those who maybe are using a work or school issued laptop that might have firewall or some other limitation. We are reminding applicants this week that those who are testing remotely should use the laptop that they used for the mock exam. That mock exam really was designed to be a demonstration that their computer equipment met the system requirements. And we feel that using that same piece of equipment really is the best path forward if you're successfully able to complete the mock exam. We've really found that the test it out feature, where an applicant can ensure that their laptop or their computer equipment meets the minimum system requirements, has provided applicants with a lot of useful information about areas where they might need some improved performance. Perhaps you're in one room of your house and your internet speeds are very low. You can get a test and a number that suggests that, and that might inform some of your exam day decisions. We're also introducing some new guidance and information in this week's email. We have found that users using Apple devices, those with Mac OS, the operating system, are given the option of downloading two versions of the exam browser. One is for Apple devices that have what's called an M chip, and the other are for those with Intel chips. They're on the page where an applicant downloads that browser is a guidance on about how to determine which browser is best for them. We have found a small population still was able to download the incorrect version of that browser. And so we are including this week's email some clear instructions about how to identify what device you have and how to install or reinstall the browser to make sure you have the right version. I want to turn to upcoming deadlines before we get to updates. February 11th is our deadline, final deadline for an applicant to submit proof of eligibility to sit for the exam. So it's always a good reminder. There's kind of two tracks of deadlines happening here. There's a applicant's bar exam application with the state bar, and then there's exam-related tasks like completing the mock exam or scheduling. This is about submitting proof of eligibility to ultimately get their bar exam application approved. So perhaps they need to submit their law study proof or a certificate of good standing from another jurisdiction. February 14th, next Friday, very significant day. It is the final deadline for someone to submit an emergency testing accommodation petition. It is also, and probably most importantly, the deadline for an applicant to schedule their bar exam session. That's February 14th, that's next Friday. And as a reminder, the scheduling window opened on January 30th, and it will close on February 14th. Applicants receive an email invitation letting them know they've been granted access to the exam and that they need to schedule. That includes scheduling instructions, account login instructions, other information an applicant needs to access their account. We have heard of, I think, a few issues related to scheduling sessions, and we've been working with Measure Learning in real time to address any of those issues as they arrive. I want to point out two populations from which we've received some feedback, and I've got, I think, some important clarity to offer them. There were testing accommodation, or excuse me, applicants receiving testing accommodations who had not yet received their invitation email and were concerned. That population are those who are testing in person due to their testing accommodation. And there's a unique process for them to schedule their session directly with Measure Learning. those applicants' seats are reserved in those test centers. So they had not yet received an invitation because that invitation was kind of a separate, unique process, but they do not need to be worried that they're not going to have access to the location where their accommodation is going to be provided. That is being reserved for them. And then there was a second group, attorney applicants, who had not received their invitations yet. And we've confirmed with our vendor Measure Learning that those applicants should be receiving their invitation emails today. And so that's good news, and that will allow them to access the scheduling tool as soon as possible. So that's a lot of the information we've been sharing over the last few weeks. I want to share new information and some updates that are coming in really in real time. We have received and heard from our stakeholders some of the feedback regarding the accessibility of our test centers. And we are working to understand where our California test taking population is currently located to determine whether or not we can identify additional testing centers. We have, though, been able to confirm that we are going to open the LA office, the Los Angeles bar exam, or excuse me, state bar office as a testing center. I don't believe we have more information to share on that quite yet, but that is a new update. And as I mentioned, we're also working to see if we can identify any additional possibilities for additional test centers. So I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions from our members here. Mary?
I have questions. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I have several, but here. The one, and I just wanted to say in this form because I sent you an email, Cody and Audrey. I viewed the thank you so much for providing the video explainer. I think that's really important. I think the students or applicants need access. It would be really awesome if they could go back in that mock exam without proctors and play around. That would be much, much better if there's any way to make that happen. The specific concern I have is it did not appear to me. Now, I didn't get to see the mock exam, so I'm just going off what people are telling me, but it appears from my view of it with what folks were saying at the Q&A and viewing that explainer is that it still did not include that PT functionality that is being promised for exam day, specifically the ability to copy and paste into their answer. That wasn't demonstrated. How you might bookmark. My understanding is there is a search function that's available, but none of that was demonstrated in that explainer. And the other thing that, just to share with you, I don't know if y'all have received this feedback, but I've heard in several forums that the shortcut keys seem to work a lot better for like the copy paste and the highlighting functions and stuff. I think it would be amazing if someone could demonstrate how that works, because that was not clear in that explainer. And those are the functionalities that are going to enable the applicants to be able to smoothly walk right in and know what they're doing on exam day. I am been like beating the drum about the performance test, but I'm sure the other folks here and you all, I am very concerned about what those performance tests are going to look like with the 90 minutes clicking between tabs and trying to learn new functionality all at the same time. Anything that can be done to make that more accessible to the applicants is going to increase the quality of the answers and decrease a lot of anxiety. So I would implore you on that point, which I have been a pain about. I realize I say it a lot. Another thing that you said, Cody, that caught my attention, that makes sense to me that the accommodated students have reserved spots, so they really don't need to worry about that they have not yet received an email. I am not sure that it is clear to those people that those spots are reserved, because what I am seeing reported is folks who are not able to make travel arrangements because they're not sure where they're going to be. That's not my personal experience, and I don't know that. So, but I just wanted to share that with you, because letting people know just what that location is would make a big difference in their ability to be able to make arrangements for travel. And the last point I wanted to make, and really it's a little bit more of a question, but it did appear at the beginning of this process that there were supposed to be many test centers available, and now it appears that there are limited test centers available with the kind of delay in providing that information. Folks are having to travel. I think they didn't think they were going to have to travel. They're going to have to pay for hotels that they probably didn't think they were going to have to. But I don't know if you have the answer to this, but what happened? It sounded in the beginning like there were many places that were going to be available, and then that just dissipated. It is what it is, I understand. But going forward, I think, again, clarity of communication in the beginning would maybe people would pick different things. So I know you all know that, but I just wanted to make those points.
You want me to talk about the centers?
Yeah, yeah, Audrey, if you can respond to the test center, then I can jump in and at least share some thoughts about the performance test.
Okay, so Measure Learning has not enough for every single applicant in the bar exam to test the center, but they do have seats that we could use across the country and globally. Part of what happened is the CBE voted to only have the tests given in Pacific Standard Time. So that means the business hours of the test center in New Jersey were such that we couldn't use a lot of centers across the country and internationally, because they just aren't, they won't stay open so many hours later to be able to accommodate the standard time. We do have some centers blocked in Mountain Time because that is close to our time. And we have seats blocked across California. The issue is the timing. So we have to schedule all the accommodated applicants first, and then if there are remaining seat blocks, then candidates can go in and reschedule once those get released, but they're not as many as we have at those larger sites. So we had another issue is that by the January 1st, the statutory deadline to file, we had 1,200 more applications than we've had in prior February. So we had so many more people applying. We have those we didn't expect so many to have to go in person. And then there's a limitation on the time zone. There's also a limitation on how many online seats there are too, because it's live remote proctoring. So not the ExamSoft model, they actually have a human resource, right, in order to proctor. So all these issues that, although I think it would be, and then that's what we're working toward the future for July, for future exams, to be able to have more options with the smaller test centers. Right now, we're trying to be as flexible as possible. Some people want to go into remote now because of the distance. Like Cody said, we're opening up the LA office. That's for some people, the Ontario office, not office, the Ontario Convention Center is more of a drive. So we're trying to be responsive. And then there are some pockets of those test center seats that candidates will be able to reschedule into. But they're not showing in the zip code pull down because they're being held while we go one by one with the accommodated applicants. Right before this meeting, we had the appeals for some of the testing. So things are just still in flux because our testing accommodation process goes parallel for a long enough time right before the exam. So just trying to meet out all these concerns and realizing that it's causing test takers anxiety, but we are trying to meet people's needs and being super responsive. But yeah, I do understand what you're saying as well.
And then, Mary, I'm happy to just at least one, I just want to say regarding the performance test in the video, the feedback that we've received thus far is helpful. And as I mentioned, we've been, I think, trying to be as responsive as possible to some of this feedback, and whether that's revising the video itself or enhancing some of our other resources, we'll do what we can to make the information as clear as possible. But since we have this audience, I wanted to maybe use it as an opportunity to just quickly say out loud the features that I think you were alluding to, because I think they are important. I think I want to just highlight the performance test. You are correct. It is a PDF viewer that exists in a separate tab from the exam platform. The functionality on exam day will allow for text to be copied from that document and placed in the response field in the exam platform. You mentioned kind of the search function. I want to just provide some clarity about the features we're talking about here. Applicants will be allowed to click a magnifying glass and search using keywords the entire document. We're really hopeful that that is a time management benefit compared to like flipping through pages. There's also on the left-hand side kind of a sidebar in which the headers for each section of the document are listed, and you can quick jump to those sections. And then, of course, there's kind of the standard annotation tools, a highlight, a comment box where applicants will be able to write notes about certain sections. So I guess I want to say that to say we've received the feedback, and I think we're going to do our best to work with it. But I just wanted to also take this opportunity to call out those features if there's any clarity. I think continuing to discuss them and allow our team to provide that clarity in these forums has been really helpful. Susan, I think your hand maybe was next.
Thanks, Cody. I have the world's most hyper-technical question, and you can just close your eyes now that I have to ask it. Whiteboards. I know that they can be 8.5 to 9, or 8 by 11 or 9 by 12. I saw the size change, but of course my students have other questions. Is there a thickness limitation in any way? Like, is there anything other than that gross measure that we need to worry about? Because they are, as bar students tend to do, becoming rather focused on practicing with the actual thing they can use. So
I'm ready for these questions. Don't worry. I got it.
Okay, so the only other thing I wanted to ask along the hyper-technical was also, I noticed that it said you could have multiple colored dry erase markers, and you hear it coming. How many? As many as they want? 2? I think that too much color is actually not a good thing, and that you should probably stop doing that. But that's not going to stop them from wanting to know, can they have 2, 4, 6, 8? Or can they bring as many as they like? And also in the learning centers. So if they're going to measured learning testing centers, do they have to use the whiteboard that's there? Can they bring their own? Is there a choice, or is that decision being made for them? And forgive me if this was in some of the materials and I missed something. I will concede I have been trying to be careful, but I could have missed it.
Okay. We initially said 8.5 by 11 because we thought that was a standard size. And then during the Q&A, there was a lot of questions saying, but mine is actually 9 by 12. So we said, that's fine. Those are both fine. Thickness, no. What they're going to do, right, is show what they have to the proctor, and the proctor is going to see that approximately it is what we said that we allowed. Another question that we've gotten about whiteboards is if there's ones that are double-sided, that is also okay. So if you've had a double-sided one, that's fine. It's just more like you can't have one that's one that's a big one that's like an office one, or like a classroom one that's really large, or on an easel. We want things to be standardized because that's the size that are in their small test centers. So in terms of the parity across applicants. Markers, colored markers, there's not going to be a limitation, but they're going to have to show all of, I guess if they have one of those kids sort of so many markers, they would have to show all the markers. It sounds like that might just take a while. I would say for their own sake to be reasonable with how many markers they have. Also, make sure that they're all dry erase, because I've done that on a whiteboard, and that is not what you want to do when you're trying to take notes. And then you start that with essay 1 and you've got something that won't erase all day. But there's not going to be like a specific count of how many markers. What was the other? Did I miss one of the whiteboard questions?
At the centers, do they have to use the one that's provided, or can they bring their own?
They have to use the one that's provided at the small measure learning test centers. But the large sites that those 4 geographical areas where there's larger, more seats, they can bring their own, same sort of conditions as the at-home tester.
Perfect, thank you. And I apologize for the pettiness.
No, it's not, I mean, that I totally get it. I always tell everyone, 3 of my siblings have taken bar exams. I totally get it. It's a lot, so I get it. Thanks,
Audrey, I have more whiteboard questions for you. Just to confirm, they can bring, it's a double-sided is okay?
double-sided is okay. I mean, it's just really the size. So again, like the purity of what they have is not such that they're going to have that kind of advantage over someone else about size. So it's okay. I didn't even know they made those in that size, double-sided ones, but okay.
Yeah, and I think the natural follow-up I'm anticipating for my students is, will the ones provided at the measure centers be double-sided or?
No, they're not.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I just had a couple more. I'm getting a lot of questions about the restrooms. I know I attended the Q&A call and I've tried to read all the literature. So one of the questions I'm receiving is, if you're at a test center, whether it's the measure learning or the pop-ups, can they go to the restroom in the middle of an exam session? Is one. And then 2, for accommodated students that might have double time or more, can they use the restroom in the middle of the sessions?
Anytime someone in either scenario, remote or in person, takes an unscheduled break, it gets documented as an incident, right, to us. So of course, if something happens and they need to use the bathroom and the alternative is something none of us want, they will get up and go to the bathroom, but that will be documented as an unpermitted break.
So would that be considered like a potential chapter 6, as we call it?
Right, so if it's just like at the exam, not every time you get a documentation is it actually a chapter 6 notice that's affirmed, right? So there's lots of things that happen at the exam when we would administer it, where we give them the notice, but the whole process of review and affirmation is different than a documentation. But we will get all those documentations of unpermitted break.
And then if I have a student, let's say, who uses the restroom, they get the chapter 6. I mean, it just sounds like they're running the risk of getting penalized for that session. Is there, I mean, does it help if they say to the proctor what they're going to do? Any advice on that? Or is it just, hey, take the risk of a violation?
I mean, they're just not going to know it will be documented. Everything gets documented in their system and in the live process.
So for accommodated students, just to clarify, if they wanted a restroom break, can they still ask for an additional accommodation for those that might have like double time?
There are a lot of, and I think that might be something in terms of the time where they have different break periods based on how much time magnifier they have. They have different allowed breaks.
Yeah, okay. Next question I had was in terms of the test sites. There's a perception, and this is why I just wanted to clarify, that if you take it at an in-person test site, that perhaps there's more options if they have an issue with the software. They might be able to go to somebody, a measure proctor, or they might be able to go to a blue book. I guess input on what options are available at an in-person testing site versus somebody taking it remote.
It is actually sort of similar in process. So there's no blue book, that's for sure. So, but online, there are technicians that they can transfer to if there's an issue, right? So it's very similarly in person, they'll have a measure support person there. And depending on the troubleshooting, they might also just get issued a new laptop to use. So there's kind of a similar process where there's technicians online and technicians in person.
And I guess final question is, I am anticipating, based on the backup laptop concept, at least the students I've been speaking to that are taking February or planning to take July, they're going to be leaning toward in-person just so that they could have that backup laptop. They have a real fear and phobia of their laptop going down and not having a backup. So I'll just put out there, I think I'd be curious to hear about, population that can be accommodated for that July exam. I know you're probably not there yet, but that is something I know a lot of our students are asking about.
What I think is helpful in that process is the mock exam. So we have the mock exam where we have things to practice, the software, but also you test out your device in terms of the RAM and the bandwidth, which are two, I think, of the major issues why someone would have a concern. So someone could sign up for online and then actually see their device in the mock exam, and then they would be either way reassured or wanting to switch to in-person. But we do have that where people can also just already test out their actual device during the mock exam.
Sure. And I think the point I'm making is I think students are going to be erring on the side of in-person. So maybe just input for all of you when you consider the amount of people that want an in-person, it's probably going to be a decent amount for July. So thanks.
Since Susan and Chris raised a bunch of whiteboard questions, now I have one, which is, are the proctors going to require people to erase their whiteboard after each question?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer is yes.
Good. And then I have a question about the video. I was so happy to see the video release yesterday. I don't even know when. Time is lost on meaning. But it didn't look like there was a multiple choice question preview. Is there going to be a separate video that shows what the multiple choice questions look like on the screen? And if not, I hope there will be.
We're thinking about whether doing a re-release or a second demo video regardless, because we thought we had captured some major questions, but it did just engender some other questions. So perhaps that would be a good thing to include, but also on the tutorial exam. So every test taker gets, a log into the Measure Learning system, and they can click through to a tutorial exam. That's not our questions, but it has a sample multiple choice question that they can already see how that looks in the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is it set up though exactly the same way it will when they take the bar? So it's not Measure's default, it's whatever sort of version of Measure you guys have adopted?
I'm trying to think if there's anything different with the multiple choice. I don't think there's anything different with the multiple choice questions between what our requirements are and what they have in that tutorial. Because some of the things that we change are things about like the cutting and pasting, but that works okay the same way in the multiple choice, like that's the same.
Good. That's good to know. I would still encourage that being released as a video. Like the first thing that I heard was, why aren't they showing us the multiple choice? Because the presumption was it was being hidden, which I was like, no, I'm sure that they just focused on these two because they've gotten more questions about them. And then I actually have a big picture question, which is after February, what kind of audit is going to be done to figure out if all of these changes actually achieve the goals that we think you all set out for this? Like, is it saving money? Because at least some of the conversations I've seen, it doesn't actually look like it's saving you all money. And maybe the sort of all of the hassle that has been put on both the bar takers and you all, is it like worth it in the long run to actually move in this direction? And how is that going to get figured out? So I don't know if you all have an answer to that, but if not, I would love to know long-term what that's going to look like.
I don't know if you attend Board of Trustees meetings, probably not, but that is exactly what the board has asked for. Very basic.
With apologies for double dipping on the questions, but I just had one more. I recall at the Q&A, somebody had asked about, or at least it was discussed, the idea of what happens if someone finishes before let's say if it's a 1 hour section, that the 1 hour is up. And at that time, I believe the answer was that they had to stay in the view of the camera until the time was up. There was, I want to say on the Measure video that they just did, there was an implication that if you finished early, you could add that time to your break. That to me seemed inconsistent. So I was wondering if that had been resolved.
It's been resolved, and I think that was part of our misunderstanding with the proctoring. So, and maybe this is something we need to highlight more on the Friday email if that's a confusion. So the camera and the proctoring is on during your break. But you don't have to sit there. So it's going to be on, but you don't actually have to physically sit in your seat if you submitted your live exam answer. So if you submitted your live exam answer and there's 4 minutes left and then you have a 5-minute break, then you'll have a 9-minute countdown, but your camera is still being proctored. So that I think was you don't have to actually sit down to be proctored until the 5 minutes, but it will still be on. Forget how many seconds. You guys are all educators. How many seconds am I supposed to wait before I say that's no more questions?
Well, if I could add just one thing, I was looking back at it as questions were coming in, and I don't want to revisit whiteboard questions, but I was noticing that the questions it seems that you all have been receiving are things that we have either always included or have added to the FAQ. So that's not a reminder for you all, but a reminder for concerned applicants that the FAQs have really evolved and grown to address a lot of the questions that we're receiving. So I was happy as Audrey, you were responding to see that it looked like all of those details have already been included. So just another pitch for our FAQ document.
Just a quick thank you for that FAQ and the constant updates. I believe I've emailed it 7,000 times or so. And I do think sometimes they just are not sure they're interpreting it correctly, even when they're reading it and it does look clear. They just want to be extra sure.
The last update related to the exam that I left was just a reminder about our communication. So our countdown email will continue to go to applicants every Friday. I try to follow that up with an email to law school deans, as well as a list of other administrators who have asked to be a part of this list. That follows usually on Friday or maybe the next day, spotlighting what we've shared with applicants, but also maybe some topics that are specifically important to our deans and administrators. So I want to use this as an opportunity to remind folks on the call that if a member of your faculty or staff would benefit from receiving this information, please contact me and I'll add them to the listserv. I tend to include at the end of that email an opportunity or an invitation to schedule a meeting if that's helpful as well. So I just wanted to let folks know here that really any of our law school stakeholders, whether or not they are members of our committee here, are more than welcome to contact us to either meet or to just be included in our regular communications.
Okay, educators, have we waited the requisite moments of silence? Okay, so it looks like we're ready to move on to our next topic. I'm glad to advise that Dr. Lisa Chavez is here to join us from our Office of Research and Statistics to talk to you about some updates regarding the State Bar's demographic data collection. So welcome, Dr. Chavez. Okay, you are promoted and now you can reveal your camera and microphone, and then we'll be ready to hear from you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Chavez, and I'm the Director of the Office of Research and Statistics at the State Bar of California. I'm delighted to share with you today some updates we've made to our key demographic questions that we collect from licensees, as well as from law students and applicants at the point of admissions. So I'm going to start with sharing my screen, and we will get started. Okay, I'm going to change this. Okay. Okay, does everyone see this? Okay, great. Okay, so let's start really. Let me just give you some background on this work. So here's a timeline. So in the early 1990s, the State Bar began collecting race, ethnicity, and gender identity at the point of admissions to the State Bar. And if you had been admitted to the state bar at the time, you would have been presented with a kind of a basic question about race ethnicity. It had a certain number of categories. There wasn't an option to select more than one. And there was also, you were asked about your gender identity, and you were only presented with 2 options. And again, in that case, you were also not given the option to present more than one. And so that continued on throughout the 1990s and throughout into the early aughts. But in 1999, the State Bar made a commitment that we were going to start collecting data more comprehensively. And well, I'll explain that in a minute, what I mean by that. And we're going to start collecting that from current attorneys. So we had a lot of attorneys who had been admitted to the State Bar prior to when the data started to be collecting in the 1990s. And wouldn't it be great to have race ethnicity data on those attorneys for the purpose of understanding the diversity of the licensee population in California? So we made a commitment to start collecting data, like I said, through something called an attorney census, which is what we started administering on a regular basis, starting in 1999. And to the race ethnicity variable, or the question, we added a category for Middle Eastern or North African and a few other categories, but I just want to get through as quickly as possible. For gender identity, we added a response option for transgender identity and non-binary attorneys. And then a few years after that, we separated out the question from transgender identity from gender identity. So that happened 2 years later. But in back to 1999, we had a question for sexual orientation, and that was new. And then disability status, and then veteran status was added to this data collection point in 2020. And what was unique about all these questions is that for wherever possible, we made it so that people could select more than one. We also had a write-in option for most of these wherever applicable. And licensees were encouraged to update this attorney census annually. And this is in recognition that we all interact with our identity. It's very dynamic, and we all interact with our identity throughout the course of our lives. And so in that regard, the state bar, I think we did a scan once, and we're like one of the, not all state bars collect this level of data from their licensees, and we do this on a voluntary basis. Not all state bars do this, and even among those they do, it's usually tends to be like one point in time and not giving people an opportunity to update. So in this way, the state bar is very innovative in this regard. But moving forward to 2024, we decided that it was time to take a really hard look at all our demographic questions for the purpose of really just promoting inclusivity in language. The literature behind and best practices regarding how to ask demographic questions and the response options you make available to people, this is kind of ever evolving. And so we figured 5 years later, it was time to take a look at that literature. In so doing, we also looked at like how different organizations recommend asking demographic questions and reporting out. And we also looked at how to what extent government agencies, after all, we are all a regulatory agency, to what extent they've evolved in this way as well. And so we looked at like how the census, any changes the census have made, how the state of California collects data on HR matters, et cetera. And so we reviewed that. And then we came up with a set of recommendations on how to revise our demographic questions on race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability status, and veteran status. And we presented those ideas to a working group that was formed by the Council of Access and Fairness. That's a sub-entity of the State Bar. And based on their feedback, we made some final revisions. And now if you were to go into your My State Bar profile today, there is an updated attorney census ready for licensees to fill out. So that's already up and live, ready for this billing cycle. So you might be asking yourself, well, what has the State Bar been doing with this data since 2019? So let me give you some examples. One big thing we do, one big product we do is produce an annual report card. And what we're doing here is really tracking methodically the extent to which the licensee population does 2 things. One is how, according to all these demographics, how the licensee population, the active licensee population in particular, compares with the state of California. So here's an example that for 2023, women comprised 50% of the adult population, but women are only 44% of the active licensed attorneys in 2023. In our most recent report card, we took the opportunity to reflect and see to what extent data these different groups have experienced change since 2019. And this is an example right here of a chart that we showed in our most recent report card, and it shows that really the women's representation among all licensees really hasn't budged much in the last 5 years. Another thing we've done with this data is use it to explore our research on experiences in the legal profession. So in 2021, that attorney census that I described that was available in the My State Bar profile, it actually had an extended set of questions that it asked questions such as, what sector do you work in? If you work in a law firm, what type of, are you a law partner or a stake, any type of shareholder? A lot of questions about workplace climate, et cetera. And here's an example of an analysis we were able to do. We were able to explore the intersection of race and gender among law firm partners and also for women and men down here. So let's see how you interpret this chart. So women comprise 42% of all people that work in law firms. However, they only comprise 30% of law firm partners and shareholders. So that's the way you would interpret this chart, is to see to what extent some groups are over or underrepresented among law firm partners and shareholders in representation to their presence in that sector. So this is another type of analysis that we've been able to do with this data that we collect. And then most recently, we started to add data on variation by race, ethnicity, and gender identity for attorneys that are disciplined. Every year, the State Bar must produce what's called an annual discipline report. It's a statutory required report. There's a lot of different reporting requirements, and we added this to that report, even though the statute doesn't ask the State Bar to do so. And here's an example of a table that we've included. We also have a table like this for race, ethnicity, so that the public can see very transparently, like, here's the gender distribution of people who received a reproval in 2024 versus probation versus disbarment, and this total is for everyone. And as you can see, men comprise the majority of people who are disciplined, regardless of what type of discipline it is. So those are just, and then we always, like I said, other type of research that we do at the State Bar that we would require a demographic analysis, we are able to use data that we collect from that's, let me just stress one more time, it's a voluntary survey. However, we do have a really decent response rate, close to 80% at this point, because on an annual basis, when the billing cycle rolls around, and you may have received these emails, there's a social media campaign to encourage people to go in and fill it out. And also new licensees, we encourage them to go in while they're paying their bills to fill out the attorney census, and really, again, encouraging people to update as needed. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking about the changes we made and why we made them. So let's start first with race ethnicity. So this is what the race ethnicity question was that we came up with in 2019. And as you can see, it was there was categories for Hispanic, Latino, Asian, and if you clicked on either one of these, you received an option to like identify your subgroup, and if your subgroup wasn't there, you could write it in. There was white, Black, or African American, Middle Eastern or North African, American Indian or Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islanders. And then there was an other race, ethnicity, or origin you can write in. Now, one of the challenges that we faced when we were analyzing this data, for the most part, this data is clean in the sense that like people selected more than one, and we were able to easily code people as multiracial, or they only selected one. And you're able to, in the end, produce like a master kind of variable that summarizes a licensee's race ethnicity. And so what we did was we created a variable that was called multiracial or multi-ethnic if they selected more than one of these major categories. But what we found was that when we explored, we were very curious to see what people wrote in when they selected other. Well, it turns out that a lot of people were, and because we didn't know how to code them, like, are they their own categories, part of the analyses? What if someone selected like white and then came down and selected other? Do we code them as multiracial, multi-ethnic, or not? And so in order to, help us make these methodological decisions in order to create like a clean data variable, and this is very standard practice, by the way, the census does this to deal with like write-in issues and things like that. When with write-in options, we found that a lot of people were like selecting one of these main categories, say like white, and they came down here and they typed in like Armenian, or they typed in like a European ethnicity, right? Or they came here and selected Middle Eastern or North African and then went down and wrote in Iranian. And so our conclusion was is that people, yes, we were excited that we gave all these options here for sub like kind of like sub like more detailed ethnicity for these two main groups here. But it was clear to us that a lot of people were interested in these who identified with these other groups to give more detailed about their ethnic identity. So that was one thing. Another thing I don't have here was that people were also kind of writing in protest answers. So they would click other and say, none of your business, or like the State Bar has no business asking these types of questions, right? And we didn't know, and they didn't select any other category, or sometimes they did select another category and they wrote in what we were calling a protest answer. And we didn't, I forget how we decided, but thankfully there weren't that many of them. But again, you have to like make these decisions. And one thing you may notice here is that we don't have a category for prefer not to answer, right? Maybe the people had put in those the protest answers, they would have selected that, right? They're telling us, I prefer not to answer. So for all these reasons, we concluded we need to take a harder look at this. So what was just so incredible is that at the same time that we're doing this in 2024, the Office of Management and Budget had just gone through a massive stakeholder engagement of how the federal government directs federal agencies, one of which, the biggest one is the census, we're all familiar with, how to collect a race ethnicity. Those of you who may be familiar with this, for many, at least two census go around, you asked about race ethnicity in one way. The first one was, are you to identify as Hispanic? Yes or no? And then the next question was, what is your race? And there had been a lot of criticisms about that. This what they call this two-step way of like identifying race ethnicity. And so the OMB, after much stakeholder engagement, they came up and recommended something. It turned out in 2024, at the time we're doing our review, this here on the right. So the next time you fill out a census, just know that instead of the two-step that I just described, this is what you're going to see. And what's so amazing is that, remember I just showed you what we did at the State Bar, right? We had a category for Middle Eastern and North African. That didn't exist before in the census. All these details before didn't exist before for different racial ethnic groups. And so, like I said, we did Hispanic and Asian. What this federal government decided to do is for American Indian, invite people to identify their tribe. And for every single one of these main identities, here's up to 6 that you can choose from. And then you also have the option to write in something. And the way the census decided these is that they looked at like the data and that and identified the top 6 nationwide. And so this is what the census did. So we decided to align the State Bar's race ethnicity with this, but we made some modifications, and I'm going to show you what those are. So we just made a modification in how the question was asked. So we really believe that we're asking how people identify. So one thing we crossed, like this is the modification, with which race ethnicity do you identify? The previous question is, what is your race and or ethnicity? We kind of deleted some language because of wordiness. And then here, we added this kind of like more direct to say, prefer to self-identify as this, instead of just like see this, click enter. So we thought it needed a little bit more direction. We added this as an example of Taiwanese as one of the examples here, because according to our own analysis of California, a large share of our licensees who did the write-in, we saw so many writing in Taiwanese. So we put that there because over 750 licensees have written that in the past under the Asian subgroup write-in option. Here for Black African American, we added this group right here because this, according to our analysis of the U.S. Census, this is actually, if everyone who identifies as Black, this is the top subgroup for that. This is according to the census's own data. Here for Hispanic Latino, we added Spaniard because again, in California, if you look at the top 6, we added it there. Here, same thing, here we added this group for Native American. Hawaiian Pacific Islander, and for white, we added Armenian because this is a really top identity for many licensees in California who also selected white. They were selecting white and then they went down to other and they typed in Armenian. So we're really, and then as you'll see, we added the, okay, so if people can't find themselves here, terrific. Prefer to self-identify as, and they're going to write something in. And then we also have the prefer not to answer here. So we're really excited about this. You know, like I said, aligning with the federal government's forthcoming, well, they've already issued the directive. So, you know, this is going to become very more familiar to everyone once people start seeing this for the first time in the census. But we also put our California twist on it by adding different groups that are very particular to California. Because like I said, the census had chosen these groups because this is what was reflect the top 6 nationwide, and we just modified to reflect California. Okay, the rest should go by pretty quickly. So let's talk about gender identity. So here's how we had it previously. And what we did was, based on our research, we removed this gender variant non-conforming options. We looked at most research that's been done recently. Human Rights Campaign, for example, was a big source for us. And that's just not, this word gender variant and non-conforming is just not used these days very often. It's not part of the Human Rights Campaign's recommendation, but non-binary is. And so we left non-binary here. So this is what we have now. And so let me just move myself so I can see my own notes. Oops, excuse me. You know, we revised the question, see how see this, which of the following best fits how you, with the gender you identify as, which of the following best describes you personally. This is how the Human Rights Campaign recommends people ask question about gender identity. One other big change we made is that before, if someone wanted to select Two-Spirit, they had the option to do so. We found some very interesting literature that says that, you know, this is actually very particular and very meaningful to Native communities. And so the way it's set up is that only people who selected Native first, and they get race ethnicity presented first. If I select Native American, then I'm presented with this Two-Spirit option to type in. So that's a big change we made. And then we also changed, revised the language from female to woman and male to man. And again, because this is just based, like when you talk about gender identity, the terminology that is used is, you know, man and woman. And again, and then also male and female is terminology pertains more to sex and not gender identity. So this is the example of how we've modified the gender identity question. Okay, cisgender, transgender identity, removed intersex as an option. We just don't see this used much. Again, not in the Human Rights Campaign recommendation. Here before we were just talking about transgender identity, realized we need to be more explicit. And because this is a question about how you identify, and that could be cisgender or transgender. And then we revised the question again to align with the HRC. And again, we made, you know, here we made the decision again in following the HRC's recommendation that this is an example where people should only select one. And so that's what we did. And again, what's nice about, you know, this, we have the ability to, like, on an annual basis, see how things are shaping up, but we can always make little adjustments as needed. And we can, for example, we may hear from stakeholders that they prefer this should be like a select more than one, and we're definitely willing to listen and learn. Okay, let's talk about sexual identity. So again, you know, before we used to use the word sexual orientation, now we're just talking more about sexual identity. So that's that label right there. Again, revise the question according to the Human Rights Campaign. HRC also recommended combining lesbian and gay. See, before they were different categories, and we added the term straight to heterosexual. And then disability status, this was one that we made a really big change. Before it was just a statement and said, do you agree with this or not? If they said yes, suddenly they received a set of disabilities to select from, or no. Instead, we revised it to be aligned with the other questions. You ask the question, do you self-identify as a disabled person or a person with disability? Again, we drew this language from a few different sources. I believe, like the ABA in particular, they have a whole committee on disability status issues for attorneys, and I think we drew upon there. And here, if they select yes, then they're presented with this question: do you have any of the following disabilities that the federal government refers to as targeted disabilities? And this is because the federal government has some very targeted, has some goals for, you know, federally funded agencies, et cetera, employers, to really you know, serve people who have this type of disability, because people with these types of abilities tend to be associated with low employment, underemployment, and they have very affirmative action goals. And so we decided that, given we are a regulatory agency and, we're about licensed attorneys who work, we decided to add this. Whereas we're not asking people to identify which these are, it's just that, do you have any of them? And if it's either yes, no, or prefer not to answer. So they have the option. And again, it's not about collecting individual details. It's just that someone saying, they can say yes, and they can leave it at that, or they can answer this question further. And then of course, back to here, it's either yes, no, or prefer not to answer. And then finally, we expanded our thinking about veteran status. Before, we just had this question: have you ever served as on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, Reserves, or National Guard? This is our way of capturing whether people are veterans. And the thing is we're thinking in terms of military status, and we have two questions now. This is one is measuring active duty, and the other one is measuring whether people were veterans. And the reason why we're doing that is because State Bar actually has some initiatives regarding supporting licensees who are currently on active duty. So that's the question: who are you currently serving, and have you ever previously served? Okay. These are our demographic questions. Let me just close by saying that, like I said, the attorney census is totally voluntary. It's online right now, My State Bar profile. If you were to log into your My State Bar profile right now, we have a beautiful new kind of landing page, and the first thing you'll see is your compliance tracker, et cetera, your fingerprinting requirements, if anything. And down here, you'll see a little box. There's the attorney census. You click it open, and all of this is just a single page, and you should be able to fill it out within 5 minutes. Encourage everyone here to fill it out, even if your institution pays for your licensing fees. We know there's a lot of licensed attorneys whose institutions, whose employers pay for their licensing fees, so they rarely log into My State Bar profile. So we actually do some social media campaigning and then emailing all licensees to encourage them to do so, and I encourage everyone to do so here. And then the last thing I'll conclude with is that the Office of Admissions will update the Admissions Information Management System, AIMS, to also collect this information at the point of admissions where applicable. And so, like I said, we're collecting it from 2 different points, but the idea is that, if they fill something out in AIMS and then 3 years later or 4 years later, they are admitted to the State Bar, we would encourage them to update their attorney census. It's just, so we're collecting data in both places, but when we analyze the licensee population, we're always relying on the attorney census. And if people don't fill it out, we rely on what they wrote in an AIMS as kind of like a backfill. But for the most part, people who are motivated to answer the questions voluntarily in AIMS, they go ahead and do so in attorney census. But again, it's the idea is that it's recognizing that, we all engage with our identities throughout the course of our lives. Identity is dynamic, and we welcome everyone to update their attorney census once a year. Okay, that is all I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Can I go first? Just a couple quick things. So what Lisa referred to as AIMS is what we publicly refer to as the applicant portal. So all of your law students have registered through the applicant portal. And then I want to just reinforce one thing that Dr. Chavez shared. If you are at an institution that pays for your bar exam dues, I just want to confirm, and I know the answer, but I'll have you do it, that someone can do this at any time, and whether they do it prior to the payment of fees or post payment of fees, whether they're paying themselves or their institution is doing so, it will be completely fine. They can do it at any time, and it is totally separate from the payment. And we encourage you to do it today after this meeting. Yes, correct?
Sure, yes.
Okay, so hopefully everyone on this call and everyone watching out in the audience will leap to their My State Bar profile for those who are licensed and fill this out. We appreciate it.
Great. Natalie, do you want to call on people?
Sure, I'll recognize Susan, please.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. It looks terrific, and it's a very nice and modern look, and it's incredibly more inclusive and welcoming. So thank you. And also, I just want to say, I had a small concern when you said it's going to be given to the students at the student portal level to fill out this information. In particular, I'm worried about only one thing, and that is the box to check that you have a significant psychological disorder. This has a long history of difficulty in the moral character arena and students being very upset and feeling like they will be caught in a lie, feeling like they are forced to disclose things that they don't want to. And I realize you have the prefer not to answer button there. But I do think at the student portal level, there might need to be some communication and messaging that this is a safe place to answer honestly and that it will not be a problem later.
Susan, I could jump in and maybe share some extra context there. One, I just want to make clear, we are currently just exploring how we can better align the data that we gather from applicants to comport to this like design. But we have we have not implemented anything, and two, I think you nailed something on the head that Lisa and I were already talking about earlier this week, and our team were talking about, which was we will not copy what Lisa has shared entirely, and as it was shown today. We will make certain policy decisions that are a best fit for our applicants. There are currently certain questions right now that we do not gather for the same kinds of concerns and considerations that you just mentioned. And so we'll be making those same considerations this time around. As I guess I just want to make the distinction that I think we see the data that Lisa's shared, the different values and the structure of that collection effort as kind of like the maximum available to us. And then we will make certain decisions to whittle down to make sure that the questions are appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you for raising that.
Okay, well, I want to thank Dr. Chavez. This was a particularly busy day for her, and so we're appreciating having her time and being able to talk with you directly about these changes here at the State Bar.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our final topic for the day, if we're ready, is to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court order related to exploring ways that bar exam could look in the future. So I'll turn it back over to Cody.
Natalie,
Go ahead, Teresa.
sorry, I was echoing.
Minutes. Okay, actually, I realized that in our zeal to talk about some of the things going on, we skipped over the minutes. So if I'll turn it back to the chair to recognize and seek a motion regarding the minutes from the last Law School Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, our item here is the approval of the August 6th, 2024 Law School Council open session minutes. If there are any changes or updates to the minutes, if you could raise your hand. If there are none, then we will call for a motion in a second. All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes from August 6th, 2024?
I move we approve the motion to approve the minutes, whatever. I think I said it wrong, sorry.
Thank you, Marion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Susan. And Teresa, will you please take a roll call vote? Thank you.
Yes, and I'm glad to hear my echoing is gone. Susan Bacchian,
Approve.
Mary Basic,
Approve.
Tiffany Gabrielson, Devin Kenyon,
Approve.
Mary Beth Moylan, and Chair Christopher Edon.
Abstain.
With oh, I'm sorry, I missed Carly Sassy.
Okay, approve.
With 4 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries.
Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Natalie.
So at this time, we'll be turning it over to Cody to discuss the Supreme Court's recent order related to bar exams in the future. This order does not in any way relate to the February 2025 bar exam. So thank you, Cody.
Thank you, Natalie. And I appreciate that mention at the top that there's both short-term changes to the exam and we have a new format for February, but we're also taking great strides to really think about a long-term vision about what the future of the bar exam looks like. So this is about our long-term vision. Let me share my screen here. I want to share some slides that were presented to the Committee of Bar Examiners Friday, January 31st, and provide some information that was brought to them, and then I'll open the floor for any questions or discussion. So as some quick background, the Supreme Court submitted an order on October 10th, 2024, which directed the State Bar to begin exploring changes to the bar exam and a future California-specific bar exam that were based on recommendations made by the Blue Ribbon Commission on the future of the bar exam, as well as some modifications proposed by the Supreme Court itself. Some key features of this new exam, as it's been proposed, is that it would test 12 topics and 7 skills for entry-level practice. There would be a focus on application of knowledge and skills performance rather than memory. The court order includes or directs the State Bar to prioritize some important exam principles of fairness, equity, and transparency, really designed to minimize disparate performance outcomes for different groups. And I think particularly interesting, was a directive to consider adopting new technologies that can help facilitate more sophisticated skills assessment. And in that order, the court pointed to some previous experimental exams from the 1980s in which we performed a kind of a real world kind of assessment, mock experience assessment, and whether or not there's technologies or artificial intelligence tools or simulations that can help support something like a real world assessment. So we've received the order and it's provided, some parameters for which to begin our efforts, but there's obviously a lot of work that should be done. We've taken some initial steps. I want to update the committee here. On December 6th, we brought to the committee a proposal to form a steering committee that would guide this effort in the development of the future exam. At that meeting, the CBE the Committee of Bar Examiners postponed making a decision. I think the committee sought some additional time to refine the structure of this possible steering committee. In between the December meeting and the January 31st, 2025 Committee of Bar Examiners meeting, staff met with psychometric experts and other exam experts from various licensing fields, meeting with individuals in the nursing field, dentistry exams, occupational therapy, and others that have expertise in revamping and redesigning very important licensing exams. So after those discussions were complete, staff brought to the committee on January 31st, so just a few days ago, a revised steering committee structure, and the Committee of Bar Examiners ultimately approved this newly proposed steering committee, and I'm going to get into those details in just a second. But I want to share that between those several CBE meetings, staff worked really diligently, not just to meet with those external experts, but there's been a great deal of consultation with CBE leadership as well as our Supreme Court liaisons. So there's been I think a broad effort with many different stakeholders and decision makers in trying to design the most effective path forward for a decision-making body. So the newly proposed steering committee, which was presented to the CBE in January and then ultimately approved by the Committee of Bar Examiners, is made up of kind of two bodies with different groups of stakeholders representing these bodies. So there will be, if this is ultimately approved by the Board of Trustees, a steering committee of 10 members, 9 who are voting members. As you can see here, there will be a chair that we aim to be a current or retired member of the judiciary. There will be several members of the CBE, member of the Board of Trustees, members of our EDGE team, the exam development and grading team. There'll be a psychometrician, universal design testing experts. So these are experts in helping create exams that are universally accessible. So as you know, as you can imagine, trying to reduce the need for certain testing accommodations by developing exams that are designed in an accessible way. An expert in innovative testing technologies to respond to the Supreme Court's directive that we explore those technologies, and a professional licensure expert, along with the Supreme Court liaison, who will be a non-voting member. We imagined what we've proposed to the committee, and what they approved was a steering committee that's made by appointment by the CBE, the Board of Trustees, or the Supreme Court, and those appointments would serve on 18-month terms. Alongside that, the proposal includes an advisory group of non-voting members, and the I think the purpose of the advisory the advisory group would be to kind of reduce the volume of work necessary for the steering committee. You can imagine there's many different areas in which there will be data and information collection and research and stakeholder engagement. Adding an advisory group will allow that work to be done efficiently and effectively, and frankly, perhaps in ways in which the advisory group can be maybe split up in different ways. It's yet to be seen how the steering committee would utilize the advisory group, but it provides some level of flexibility and nimbleness to research necessary topics. I think we also believe that the sheer scope and range of the expertise and perspectives required really warrant having a advisory group that can provide enough space for the many different perspectives to come to the table. So in that advisory group, as it's proposed today, there are 3 law school deans. There's practicing attorneys who manage law firms or supervise new attorneys, 2 of those. 2 current students, 1 recently admitted attorney, 1 representative from the California Lawyers Association, 1 expert in disability and accessibility, and 1 member representative from our Council on Access and Fairness. And as we imagine it, the steering committee will appoint those members to the advisory group, and from there, the steering committee will make certain determinations and provide direction to the advisory group on how it can either reorganize itself or what efforts it should take, and on what timelines. So it's taken us several meetings to get to the place of approving the composition of the steering committee. I want to lay out what we imagine being the next steps. So in February, the end of February, we have our Board of Trustees meeting on the 20th and the 21st. We are seeking board approval of this composition. In February, between February and March, we will solicit and accept applications for committee members and others to be a part of the steering committee. In April, we will seek the CBE's approval of steering committee members, and the CBE will also appoint its member representatives. In May, we will ask the board to then approve that slate of steering committees. And then in summer, we imagine that the steering committee will convene and they will solicit applications to the necessary advisory groups as well. Okay, so that's the update based on what occurred at this last January CBE meeting on the 31st. Happy to take any questions. Mary?
Can always count on me for a question. The only thing that concerned me a little bit about the composition is there doesn't seem to be subject matter experts on the actual 12 subjects that are eligible for testing and skills. And that seemed to be if you're designing the exam, you would think that you would want folks on there who actually understand that content. That's just an observation I have. Too late to do anything about it. It's already been set, I guess. But I could see the folks who are on that committee designing an exam that, as a practical matter, isn't operable because they might not have the understanding of the content that they're trying to test in an intimate way. So I just wanted to make that observation.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think the steering committee members, as they're listed here, some are very specific. Obviously, we have our committee of bar examiner members. We are bringing in the expertise of our Edge team. So there is some content expertise there. And I think it's not yet clear who the professional licensure expert will be. So there's, I think, room still for some content expertise, whether or not that's in the steering committee or it ultimately exists in more robust form in the advisory group, I guess is yet to be seen, but I appreciate that feedback. Susan?
I share Mary's concerns, but also I wanted to just share some concerns I have about the one you just pointed out, the professional licensing expert. I would just like to give my thought that please let this be someone who is an expert in attorney licensing. While I'm happy to see things from nursing and dentistry and medicine, we studied all of those when I served on the Blue Ribbon Commission, and all of them had serious failings in their ability to sort of work for lawyers. And so I would really encourage that. I'm happy to see a smaller group, that it's not as large as the BRC, so that it will hopefully be a more effective discussion and process. But I would really hope that someone on this is an expert in attorney licensure, not nursing, not dentistry, not medicine. And then I hope that they do not have any affiliations with professional groups like the NCBE or folks like that, that they need to be either academics or independent consultants or somebody who is an expert in lawyer licensing for the sake of the legal profession in the right ways, not in monetary ways. And with that, I'll apologize for having to say something like that.
No need for apologies. This feedback is helpful. We're still, we're at the stage of confirming this steering committee, but there's still, and there will be, I think, throughout the process, opportunities to capture feedback like this and hopefully inform the process. So this is welcome information or welcome feedback.
And at this point, I'd like to touch base with the chair. We are at 3 o'clock. We can do an extension of 5 to 15 minutes. Would you like to request such an extension?
Yes, I'd like to request an extension of 15 minutes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And Devin, I see your hand is raised.
I will just co-sign Susan's very last comment. She speaks for, I will not say all of us, but at least me in a lot of meetings. And I would sort of just ask that sort of whoever is managing the sort of the steering committee process, that sort of this group get regular updates on what they're doing, and that assuming they're going to be doing some kind of listening sessions or something like that, like this should be one of the groups that they come and talk to about of their process. In theory, we're supposed to reflect what the ABA schools are thinking about, and so we should be part of that conversation.
Any other questions or feedback? Okay. Well, I really appreciate the comments shared thus far. We certainly will be providing updates, and you'll probably hear more from me on this as well. But I appreciate the discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to new members.